Today on Look Back Laughs, we look back at the amazing television show SCTV. Boom!
Tired of ordinary YouTube? Don't click that mouse. The LBLTV network is now on the air. Starring Pete Zedlacher, and Damonde Tschritter. Produced by Scott McFarlane. YouTube as you've never seen it before. This is the LBLTV YouTube network.
Welcome to Look Back Laughs. Today on the show, we are going to discuss one of the great television programs of all time, SCTV, with none other than one of the greats of Canadian stand-up comedy, my comedy brother from the Snowed In Comedy Tour, the one and only Damonde Tschritter is with us today. Hey, Damonde, how are you, brother?
Greetings and salutations, all my ayahuasca friends.
Oh, very nice.
It's a West Coast greeting to you all.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm on the opposite side of the Rockies, so friggin' rights, brother. I guess right back to you. Some kind of Alberta version of an ayahuasca bow. How are you?
Yeah, they don't have one. I'm good. I'm staring at the ocean. I'm in lockdown still, sort of. You know, we can go outside a bit, but I'm 3 blocks from the ocean, pal.
Beautiful.
So it's I'm doing well. It's been an interesting year, and I'm learning a lot of new stuff. When you're not allowed to do what you're good at for like a year, you learn to do some other things that you never thought you'd do.
Well, this is interesting because we were on previous episodes, we were discussing about like what we've been doing in pandemic and lockdown. And I've discovered that I will never retire. I can't do this. I can't do nothing. I have to do something. So this show is born of that. Your podcast is born of that. This is how we as creative people have to keep moving. So
you gotta,
yes,
you gotta keep doing something. We started the podcast about 2 months before the pandemic, maybe 3. So it's weird. Our podcast actually has us going into a pandemic and then through it for a year. As a time log, it's kind of interesting, but you got to be doing something, right? Like we can write and do stuff, but we're not out carousing around and being funny in front of people.
We're not pursuing our actual craft of stand-up comedy. We are finding peripheral ways to find creative ways to pursue comedy, but it's not stand-up comedy. Like I've done a dozen of these virtual Zoom shows, and they're fine. I don't know if you've done them, but it's not the same. We've really discovered that stand-up comedy is a two-way street between an audience and a performer. And if you put a plastic screen between it, it's not the same. It's even like when you see a televised show, like when we record the Snowed In Comedy Tour, we bring all the cameras in there. It's fantastic. It looks great or whatever, but it's never going to match the energy and the enthusiasm that an audience has seeing it live. You know, there's something that happens between a performer and an audience member. Yeah.
And that's what you don't get until you go to see stand-up live. It's kind of like the first time you see a live NHL game or something. You're like, oh, it's way different. You can feel it. It's like you feel stand-up when you're there. It's so much different when people see it live than on TV.
Absolutely.
Although I will say, I enjoyed the Zoom in the part that I did a show for like all the Hockey Association of Denver. So I don't know, they had like 500 people, families, whatever. It was a pretty big show. It's the only one that paid decent. And all I had to do 20 minutes. All I did was walk out of my kitchen to where you see me now, standing in front of this wall. Did 20 minutes, walked back, had a sandwich, got paid, didn't have to fly to Denver.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But that's only because I've been to all these places.
Yeah, and
right.
At the end of the day, I'm sure you would love to go to Denver right now. Like, we're.
I would, and I liked that I got to see all those things. But part of me had that little bit of like, oh, that was kind of interesting. Yeah. Instead of taking 3 days of my life, it took 20 minutes. I microwaved I microwaved my career into a 20-minute thing. That's all it was, right? It was just the stand-up, and the rest of all the stuff wasn't there. So
yeah, there are some few perks, but I sure am missing the live element, and more than anything, I think I miss the camaraderie that I have with our brethren.
Yeah.
You know, hanging out in the green room before a show, and I've got this idea. What do you think? And you know, just talking shit.
Yeah,
that's another great reason to do this show. Is just I love the just catching up with my brothers and seeing how are you doing, and having a conversation about comedy, because this is something we've also discussed in the show, is that we never talk about comedy in the sense of like, hey, how did you get into it, and hey, who was your influence? Like, those are conversations comics don't really have. So this is what this show is all about. And today you've selected SCTV. So let's take a look at SCTV. So Dame, today we're going to discuss SCTV, and I'm very excited by this topic because, well, thank you for joining us on the show. I pitched you the show, and I asked you who would be your influence, and you said SCTV, and I lit up because I have that same memory. I'm sure every young comic in this country has that same memory of tuning in SCTV for the very first time and discovering, what is this? And then finding out it's Canadian. So do you have a memory of discovering SCTV for the very first time?
Yeah. I was like 10 maybe, and my parents got divorced, and I moved to like a small town where they didn't have cable. Like, so my world had been crumbled, and now I only had the CBC and maybe one other fuzzy channel. And so it was right at that age when you're screwing around and you're staying up just late enough to see kind of what's going on. And then it had the CBC emblem, and I thought that the TV was shutting off, because that would be like in the end of the night when the TV,
the national anthem was about to start.
Yes, it just would end, and then a national anthem, and then there was no TV till the next day. You were done. Find something else to do.
Light
the TV
noise,
viewing
right,
day's over. Yeah. So the emblem, the CBC emblem was there, and then it just, like, you heard this, and it moved over, it got pushed over, and this SCTV stopped. And it's like, now the SCTV network, and then it had an opening with these people. I'm like, what is this show? And it was all these funny people doing like these sketches and stuff. And I like, you know, they did a thing where a guy would play Bob Hope, and I hated Bob Hope. He was like this old comic, even when I was a kid, who was like, you know, introduced football players, and he had corny jokes that he read off cue cards, but America loved him. He was in commercials. My grandfather loved him. So they'd have a guy sort of satiring Bob Hope, but you were laughing at Bob Hope. And it was like, wow, these guys are making fun of Bob Hope too. And it made me laugh. And then to find out it was Canadian, because I had seen the Saturday Night Live episode or something, you know, one or two maybe. But to find out this was like the McKenzie Brothers came on. Right. And that just changed my world, because there was these two guys in cases of beer, the same beer cases that my dad and his friends drank, stacked in a house. Guys who sounded like... Yes, hence the divorce, exactly why he was divorced. The little stubby bottles. Guys who spoke like my dad's friends. Like, hey, work one up there, fella. And just they came on the Lukuku, and then they did this show, and I thought it was hilarious. And I was like the McKenzie. All of a sudden, Monday at school, I was a McKenzie brother in the back of class with my buddy, right, doing showing people what the Great White North show was. And that was like the start of doing comedy, right? Because you know, you could get laughs kind of doing other stuff. Yeah, I don't think I had seen stand-up ever at this point. This was like what I saw for fun. It was either a sitcom or this, but this was different, right? Because this was a bunch of funny Canadian people, right? And John Candy.
Of course. I mean, like, you're describing Dave Thomas doing his Bob Hope impression.
Yes.
Years later, I got to meet Dave Thomas. He had a book signing because he had written an SCTV book. And I asked him to personalize it for me and give me some advice for an up-and-coming comedian. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And he wrote down, never give up, Dave Thomas. And I never gave up, Dave. And here we are on YouTube.
Still haven't given up. Well, you've got your actual own studio. just like they had. What was the name of their studio? SCTV Studios, but it was called, there was something else to it.
Okay. We'll have to look that up.
I can't even remember, but it was, and to find out, like, this was being filmed in Edmonton. This is
Edmonton, of all places. Yeah,
it was in Edmonton at the beginning. So the first one I saw would be like around that time. They were still filming out of Edmonton, and I think they were allowed to do whatever they wanted. They were on late at night. Nobody was really keeping track of these guys.
That's right. Yeah, and it was like I'm in Calgary, so just up the road here. They were shooting at the Global Studios in Edmonton, and they were kind of given carte blanche, like just do it. Again, one of these great stories of like the previous generation's television, where it was just like executives were like, I don't know, go make television, I guess. It just doesn't get made that way anymore. Now it's like focus groups and 13 executive producers, and like everyone's got their hand in the pie, and all these great stories of television shows that got made back then, like Monty Python and SCTV. They were all about the artist. They just said, hey, here's some money, go make a TV show. And of course it was brilliant because it wasn't interfered by the powers that be. And I think that's the charm of SCTV, is that it was cheap and cheerful. It looked like television that could be made in a backyard, but it was so inspired and so funny. It was
it had a two-part to it as well, right? Because the show was encapsulated in a network. And then you saw the shows that they had on. So there was Guy Caballero, was Ray, what's his name? Flaherty, Joe Flaherty in a wheelchair. In a wheelchair that he didn't need. He could walk. He used the wheelchair to get sympathy, and he had
that was revealed in later episodes.
Yes, and later, yeah.
He's a fake.
Yes, but he would be dressed in like a guy from Miami who might be a shyster running the network or whatever. So you'd see him arguing all the time, and with his people, and what he'd put on, cutting costs, so you could see why the shows looked like shit too, even though that was just like the Canadian bad camera stuff that we have here. They call it soap opera look in the States, but here it's like Littlest Hobo look, right?
Oh my God, Littlest Hobo, of course, yeah. It looks like it was shot on a home video camera.
Which is what the 4K TVs look like now, if you don't change them. When you buy a new TV, it looks like the Littlest Hobo until you fix it.
And each new television has a new name for that or whatever, but they call it the soap opera effect. And you have to turn that off because at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm like, well, I should get a brand new TV. So I got a brand new TV, and I'm like, doesn't this look great? And we were both kind of looking at it going like, no, it looks terrible. So I looked it up. I'm like, oh, you got to change the settings. Otherwise, every show looks like the Littlest Hobo or SCTV.
Yeah, it looked like that. And just guys, like I had never seen a 3D movie, but when they were doing they do this 3D thing, I still thought it was hilarious for the late night hosts of the show.
Yeah, I'm giggling as we see. You mentioned the McKenzie Brothers, and that's obviously probably the biggest influence, especially for us Canadians. It gave us something to an identity that we could make fun of, and it all came out of spite. I don't know if you know the backstory to this, but I guess the producers were like, you need more Canadian content. And they said as a joke, what, should we just be wearing toques and eating back bacon and sitting there drinking beer? So then they literally made this as like a middle finger to the executive producers. But it turned into like a thing. It was like, well, I guess we'll do this again. And, sketch after sketch, and then movie and albums and Juno Awards. That's
the way executives make their best decisions, is accidentally. When they do that, and that it turns out to be great. And because that is another thing, when I saw this not long after their 12 Days of Christmas came out, that whole album, there was a comedy album, so people were playing that. Like, I went to see Strange Brew, came out maybe 2 years after, not long after, and I couldn't understand why this wasn't the biggest movie of the year in 1983. How was this not huge? Like, who's going to Ghostbusters and E.T. when this and like Strange Brew is not that great a movie, like in hindsight.
I disagree. It's got a place in our hearts.
Yes,
but
it's weird.
Yes, it is. It's so very fucking weird. Like, there's a scene where the dog rolls up the roof of the house. Like, it's just out of nowhere. They decided to do this kind of science fiction-y kind of like the dog rolls up. And as a kid, I cried laughing because that was just so weird and funny that They just put in a weird sense of humor into that guy, little piece of humor.
And they let Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas direct that. They wrote and directed that movie.
Right.
And it's just shot like around Toronto and stuff with an evil brewmeister and some hockey. But it's one of those things where like, and that was another cool thing about seeing these guys on SCTV first and knowing who they were in Canada. I started to see them in like big movies, right? So John Candy, when he started popping up in Stripes or Splash, Volunteers, Tom Tuttle from Tacoma, like I knew who he was. I didn't know who Tom Hanks was. I knew who John Candy was.
Yeah,
and it got to the point where like when I saw he was in a movie, if I saw there was a movie with him or Rick Moranis or Eugene Levy or these guys or any of them, I would go to see. Like, I don't know if you ever saw Club Paradise.
No, I actually haven't seen Club Paradise.
It's a movie that's starring Robin Williams in one of those not tropical vacation, but sort of like a Mexico vacation place when all those big first Sandals vacation he was
Sandals Club Med,
Club Med idea, but a cheap sort of knockoff one that Robin Williams runs. He lives down there, and Rick Moranis and Eugene Levy are coming there and like open shirts trying to pick up chicks, and they're awful. Right? They're the comedy relief in a Robin Williams movie.
Wow, that's true.
He's already the comedy, but they steal the show.
Yeah.
And so I'd see a movie like that and I'd watch it. I'd go to see Summer Rental, which is just a John Candy movie. There's no other stars in it. And it's a Canadian guy until it got to, we got to like, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. By then he's a star.
Of course.
Early on.
My God. Then, absolutely. But those first few days of like, of the early days of SCTV, like as a kid, we have the same kind of backstory, the same origin story. Like, small town, one channel. We, had CBC. Remember, it was the same story. Like late at night, flipping through channels, all of a sudden discovering SCTV and being like, what? And then going to school and talking about it. And then one of the older kids was like, "You watch SCTV, you should be watching Saturday Night Live." And I'm like, "Oh!" And then I watched Saturday Night Live, and I'm like, "What?" I never stayed up that late, So then it might have been the very first kind of like planting the seeds of like, wow, being a performer and then finding out they were Canadian. It just was so inspiring.
I remember being proud of them when they went to NBC and seeing it move the peacock out of the way. I was like, look at that Canadian show taking over a U.S. network. Now they're famous, right? It wasn't just a show in Canada, like the Beachcombers or whatever we had. And,
it wasn't Relic and Bruno Gerussi.
I knew that they had made it on American TV, and that was big. I knew it wasn't just us watching now, right? Yeah. And I guess there was just enough back years of like, they'd have their probably new episode out, but they could run it kind of, it wound up later being played like when I came home from school. Like not at 3, but late, sometime in the afternoons or maybe every evening because they had reruns. I can't remember what time it was on, but you could see it almost daily.
Yeah, and I have the same story. So I think that's how I discovered it was in reruns because it was originally broadcast a little earlier than I had caught it, and then it was in reruns that I had picked it up. And I think it was like from the global network was broadcasting it, and so I think that was one of the other channels that we had picked up from CBC, and
I think maybe it was maybe we wound up getting a couple of channels later. And it might have always been on there, but I remember now it was like you'd talk to another kid who was funny at your school that you're maybe getting along with, and then them coming over to your house to watch SCTV at like 4. You both were watching it at your own homes, and you find out like he liked the news with 3CP1 for like the Russian news that they had with Eugene Levy. Do you remember that Russian?
It was. And then what was this? It was a cheese name anyway. He was the broadcaster and had a cheese name. Earl Camembert. That's what it was.
Earl Camembert and Earl Camembert. They were great, right? So you'd start to meet a couple of other kids that were funny, come over to your house and hang out and laugh at this after school, and then go back up and play road hockey or whatever you were doing.
And of course, the standouts were John Candy, obviously, and then Martin Short in later seasons of SCTV. Or I might be incorrect on that. He might have always been there, but he was a young phenom on that show. Like he was and I always remember Lawrence Arbuck, his character, Lawrence Arbuck. I think first debuted on SCTV on the game show Halfwits. Now, I don't know if it was like a school versus school. I forget what was the show that they were spoofing anyway, but it was like a game show.
Oh, Reach for the Top.
Reach for the Top, exactly.
Reach for the top. Those kids who would compete to be smart.
But
yes,
they called
it's coming back. Yeah.
It was called Half-Wits, and it was all the dumb kids from their school. It was just such a brilliant idea. And Lawrence Arbach was just like this meek, dumb kid. It was just immediately I was like, oh, I love Martin Short so much. And to this day, I'm a gigantic fan of Martin Short.
The first time I saw Martin Short, because he was sort of like a part-time player who came along. So I watched enough of it where he wasn't there. And when he first showed up, I didn't like it that there was a new guy that was not one of the ones that I knew. Like, who's this guy coming in? So the first time I ever saw him do Ed Grimley, like the whole, his most famous character, was maybe, I don't know if it was the first time he had done it on TV, but it was sort of a takeoff of the Nutty Professor on an SCTV episode where he was Ed Grimley dancing. And then it was like he drank the potion, puff of smoke, and he turned into John Cougar Mellencamp.
Yeah.
John Cougar Mellencamp was a guest star on the show. And I'm like, this is John Cougar Mellencamp, right? Like, that was the first time I saw Martin Short.
Oh, you just kicked me right in the nostalgia with that one. I forgot all about that. Like, I haven't thought of that sketch since I probably saw it the first time. Oh, that's brilliant.
I saw it registering on you, where you were like, hey, I saw it coming back to you. Like, boom,
when he did the nutty Professor, I'm like, oh yeah, where does it go? John Cougar Mellencamp, of course.
Yeah, he turned into Mellencamp, right? So I liked him after that. Once I saw Ed Grimley and some stuff, but I didn't like when I saw, like, first he was, they were bringing in a new guy, and then then in the later years, like right near the end, like the last couple of seasons, maybe 18 episodes, I looked up. It was only Flaherty, Levy, Andrea Martin, and Martin Short left. Okay. Everybody else is gone. They maybe did an episode or something, and you started to get that guy that did like Clappy the Clamp, like he had a little snappy sock puppet, and they did
that's right. Yeah. Oh, I remember these later episodes.
He was sort of a pockmarked guy that never went any further than SCTV.
Yeah, he was a Second City, and that we should discuss that too. Like, SCTV stands for Second City Television, and that's something I didn't learn until much later in life. That it was like, oh, this is based on the theater company from Chicago who eventually came to Toronto. And it was the Second City. It's a fascinating idea because Chicago is the Second City. That's the nickname of, it's not New York. It's not New York. It's the Second City, Chicago. So they called the Second City theater company Second City. But then they moved to Toronto and it was called Second City. But then they shot the TV show in Edmonton. So all of a sudden SCTV Second City got so removed from like Chicago, Toronto to Edmonton. Downgraded
all the way.
Oh my God! It was the ninth city.
Kicked further.
It was the 35th city by the time it made it to Edmonton.
Well, I actually looked it up. So the original was Second City Television, what you're saying.
Yes.
And then that was sort of the original plan. Then they had Martin Short sort of joins. They do another one that ran 76 to 81. And then it becomes the SCTV network. That's the one we would have seen where it moved the thing over. That runs from 81 to 83. And then it's the SCTV channel at the end. And that's when almost everyone's gone, but there's 4 of them left. The others have all sort of gone on. Like Rick Moranis and John Candy, they've all gone on to do movies. And you probably just saw them. Like if you were watching reruns every day, you probably wouldn't see the progression of, they're just sort of gone. They're not on this one today or whatever, right?
And I didn't realize that they started. Did you say 76? 1976 was like the first few episodes of SCTV?
Yes. And whether that's showing everywhere or only late at night, obviously we're not out watching that. Like whether that's been on all that time, I probably saw it at the end, like 81, I would say.
Yeah. So I guess my only frame of reference is like those mid 80s ones. That's so I've got some research to do. I got to check these out.
Well, those would have been the ones that we saw live if you stayed up. But if you said you're like myself watching after school, that's why we would have seen all that back catalog. Yeah, is what we were watching. Like, that's why we could watch it after school every day because they had 80 episodes from those days.
And you would go to school and do the McKenzie Brothers. So that was kind of the first. That was the first kind of inspiration for you to actually try comedy. Was parroting what you saw on SCTV.
Yeah, I had moved on from Star Wars. reenacting Star Wars to now I found something funny and at the back of the class, and I couldn't wait till we had like, oh, you got to do some sort of class project where you're going to have present in front of the class. How are we going to do this funny?
Okay.
Right? Let's go be these guys. Let's do,
there you go.
And we're getting good grades for it. For teachers, like, wow, that was a different presentation. And at the same time, getting in shit for disrupting the class at times. Like, it wasn't always good, right? Once you get a little McKenzie brother fever in you, you're going to disrupt the norm.
That's it. So SCTV was like the first seed that kind of planted, like, hey, maybe I could be a performer. Maybe this is something I would like to do.
You know what? It attracted me to funny. Yeah. And then when I saw these guys sort of popping up in movies and this show, and I was pretty funny kid and I could get laughs and stuff, it seemed to be possibly the best way out of a dirt road town. It seemed joining the military, getting a job at the mill, these things were not tempting to me, but those guys got out from wherever and were in a different place than where I was. Comedy looked to be a way that I figured, oh, if I learn this, or like not even if I learn it, there's something when I leave here, when I grow up and I'm allowed to leave this land, I can go to a place where that stuff is happening. And I did.
That's so great. And you did, absolutely. Yeah. And here we are. We're national touring headliners across the country and around the world. All because of SCTV. Because they planted the seed that flourished into our careers. Here it is.
Yeah, maybe I would not have ventured further than the 30 kilometers to Port Alberni and the mill up the street had I not seen this going on.
Maybe he would have joined the military. I'd be chatting to Corporal Tschritter right now. And oh, geez, hey, that was a beauty. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Dame. And how about a fun little gag at the end of the show? We got some toots going on from the McKenzie Brothers, eh?
Take off, you hoser.
Oh, come on. I got 2 soakers. This sucks.
That's a really good Rick Moranis.
I have a Rick Moranis story I'm going to do right now. When I was living in New York City, Rick Moranis was my neighbor on the Upper West Side. And my buddy bumped into him at an ATM. And they just struck up a conversation and they started talking about SCTV. And so this guy is telling me the story. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I can't wait to bump into Rick Moranis. So I see Rick Moranis one day. He's walking towards me. And I'm walking up 73rd Street, I think it was. And I see him and this is what I said. I said, oh, how's it going, eh? And Rick Moranis did this. And then kept walking. And I was humiliated. And I feel terrible to this day that I was like, oh, that was my one chance to talk to Rick Moranis, and I decided to do a McKenzie Brothers to him.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. You got a really good Rick Moranis, but that's the whole, like, you're so excited, and then you blow it with the old. And there was probably that moment as you said it where you think his reaction is going to be like, oh my God, you are super talented. You should come on the show. I'm going to put you in show business.
I had no intentions behind it outside of like striking up a conversation with him, and that's what I went with. And then last year I found out that hey, he got beat up in New York City. Hey, did you see that on the news? Rick Moranis got punched out. And I was like, wow, somebody else didn't like him on.
Who doesn't like Rick Moranis?
Exactly. He's a national treasure. My God.
That's how nasty a town New York is. Someone punched out Rick Moranis.
The times have changed. My God.
It got him back in show business, though. Good thing.
He didn't need to get back into show business on his own. He got, on his own terms. We sending all the best to Rick Moranis. If he happens to see this, I'm sorry that I did my McKenzie Brothers to you on that summer of 1993 in New York City.
Maybe that's what happened to him. Maybe that guy was like, maybe it wasn't a mugging. Maybe it was a guy like, hey, you got to get back in showbiz. He's like, no way, eh? And then, I'm telling you, I'm going to punched him in the face. And now he's back in show business.
We could talk for 3 more episodes about SCTV. We could, we barely scratched the surface, but I'm so glad to talk to you about how you discovered the show and how it influenced you and how we could share this, how we got inspired by SCTV to pursue comedy on our are on our own terms here. So thanks for coming on the show, Dame. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
I'm glad I could be here and let the kids know what it's like with how you had to discover something then on TV, and if you didn't, that was it.
You missed it.
You didn't get to stream it, pick it. Nobody told you anything. If you caught it, you found it on your own.
That's exactly it.
And you had to make time around it.
Nobody told me to watch SCTV. I discovered it on my own and was just like, what is this thing? You know, like now anybody's watching this who's never seen SCTV can go on YouTube and watch everything of SCTV instantly. So we come from a different era. The long gray beards that we stroke is weird.
I used to. You don't have to be somewhere at 11. You could just sit back on your own time,
make
get your favorite sandwich built.
These kids today, they don't know. They don't know how hard it was to get into comedy.
They don't need to leave town for anywhere else. It comes to them.
And they can also watch you on the Microdose podcast you do with our snowed-in brother, Mr. Paul Meyerhog. I love the podcast, guys. It's so great.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I told Paul when he's on the show, like I've probably seen like listened to about half of them, like which is a lot. It's a lot. But
that's good.
I told Paul I get thrilled when I hear my name mentioned on it. I was like, I got famous friends.
You slide in there once in a while.
I love it. Yeah, and I told Paul my favorite segment you guys do is the news that you have no clue about, and it's wildly entertaining. Trending shred.
I have no idea what's going on Twitter and the news. And I only started watching. I hadn't watched news for 2 months. I
was on the road. I was driving, and then like, hey, so, and then he would say, like, Paul would say something massively big story that happened in the news, and then Damon would be like, no, I hadn't heard about this. And I'd be sitting in the car going, how the fuck did you not hear about this? Like, it's massive news. It's everywhere. It's just no clue.
I didn't know when the second impeachment was taking place, pal. That was not on my radar.
Donald Trump is president? Oh, God damn. What? Come on. I love the podcast. I think you guys do an outstanding job, and it's getting some huge traction. Like, you guys are doing really well with and drawing in an audience. So I'm thrilled for you guys.
Yeah, and it's just us. It's just us talking funny. We don't do guests. It's just us trying to be as funny as we can for an hour.
Yeah.
And so check out the Microdose podcast wherever you stream your podcasts. Yeah. And then Comics Delight, my album, Comics Delight, is out there.
That's right. And we'll put all those links in the bio below. Do you have any shows coming up that you can tell people to check out?
Oh, no, not really. Nothing I'd be proud enough to send them to.
This is it. This is the pandemic comedy now. Like, I guess we'll discover. We'll be back, maybe touring with Snowed in the next year. Maybe fingers crossed. Yeah. But
this is the show that I'm sending people.
This is the show. That's great.
So if you're here, I've already sent you.
You've already seen it.
For those of you who have just shown up, that's because I sent you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, brother.
All right.
That's perfect. We have to end the show with that. That's great.
Yeah. Sign up.
Oh, wow. You made it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to see some more, we're going to post some clips over here on my shoulders. Check them out. Hit the like button down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll do it again sometime. Good night, everybody.